What's a sign that someone is way smarter than they let on? Story 1. I agree with most of the replies here, but I'll add my 2 cents. I think people who meet you on your wavelength are smarter than most. They can talk about pretty much anything with anyone. They'll shoot with some people, discuss politics with others, listen as well as talk, ask questions, but also will take time to explain things if they're asked. Story 2. People who ask perceptive questions, which show a deep and considered comprehension of what's being said and meant, and how this interacts with the wider picture. Story 3. Good comedy. There's so many great comedians who play dumb and make jokes about how stupid they are, but I think you have to be quite above average intelligence in order to be a really great comedian. Story 4. It's actually interesting to see how many different views on intelligent people seem to have. If we talk about logic smart, then a subtle sign is worrying about obscure edge cases too much. Emotional smart, bringing up stuff that reassures other people before they bring it up. Story 5. Actually taking a moment to contemplate an argument they disagree with rather than just reflectively dismissing it. Smart people are willing to have their assumptions challenged and reevaluate them. Story 6. One little thing I've noticed is intelligent people tend to laugh at jokes faster than the average person because they got it right away rather than having to process it and figure out why it's funny or laughing. Just because everyone else laughed at it, people are trying so hard to discredit me here when I didn't say people who don't laugh quickly are stupid. So why are you offended? Story 7. Taciturnity. Many quite smart people that I know are 90 taciturn. They don't want to share their thoughts in front of many people, but when you talk to them one-on-one, they share facts, knowledge, and thoughts, and you instantly think, wow, guy, I didn't expect from you that. Yes, in many ways, they are just introverts. Story 8. If they begin their answer to most questions with something like, I don't really know, I don't have all the details, I'm sure someone more knowledgeable can enlighten you on this. Story 9. People who are confident in admitting they don't know something, often by saying they don't know, or I don't know when asked a direct question. People who can clearly define the boundaries of their own intelligence, are humble and learn by making mistakes, and usually not all the time are more intelligent than those who lie, mask, use excuses, or become defensive about what they perceive as a mental deficiency. Story 10. Anyone that can sit down and listen and doesn't try to constantly lead the conversation. Smart people are always looking to learn and understand, not to teach and be understood. Story 11. After looking through this thread, you guys are basically just describing an introverted Redditor. They're loud and talkative smart people too, you know. Story 12. 1. They calmly listen to others too. They're quick to identify if they're wrong. 3. They do not present themselves as a know-it-all, nor do they try to belittle or demean others' intelligence. 3. They're compulsively curious, always seeking to learn more, for they care equally about tiny details just as much as the big picture. 5. They're patient. 6. They're not shy about asking for help or asking good questions. 7. They're very good at rephrasing concepts in their own words. Story 13. People who realize they don't know everything, and intelligence comes in many forms. You're more likely to listen to people who are well-informed in different fields if you don't already think you have all the answers. This is how you learn. I think too many think being smart is something you're born with, like you just have a quick brain, but it's more about humble curiosity, MO. Story 14. Rather than getting frustrated when they don't know something, they get excited. I had a chemistry professor in college that was insanely smart. And when somebody asked a question she couldn't answer, her eyes lit up as she said, I don't know. Let's find out. To her, not knowing something was just an opportunity to learn something new. Story 15. Being quiet. Note, this isn't always a telltale sign, but I've noticed usually the smartest people tend to keep their mouths shut while they watch how everyone else is going to screw up before they speak. Story 16. Persistence is a great sign of intelligence. Curiosity is another great sign. Intelligence comes in many forms. So I would ignore all the comments suggesting that intelligent people keep their mouths shut, etc. Story 17. Different forms of intelligence show themselves in different ways. Having one set standard is a surefire way to miss beautifully brilliant people. Spelling edits. Story 18. Dunning-Kruger demonstrates that the smarter you are, the more likely you are to express doubts about your own beliefs, your own knowledge, and your own intelligence. You're also more likely to overestimate the intelligence of other people. They also show that the dumber you are, the more likely you are to show confidence in your own beliefs, knowledge, and intelligence. You're also more likely to underestimate the intelligence of other people. In other words, the person saying you're all stupid, and the smart one here, is more likely to be less intelligent than the one saying, we're all intelligent people here, I might be wrong. What do you think in general? Overconfidence is valued more than intelligence. That suggests that in general, people prefer dumb shits, but, I could be wrong. Story 19, honestly, one of the most immediate signs of intelligence is controlling emotions. If you're looking for a more scientific answer, it's not to say emotionally unstable people can't be smart. There are lots of reasons people can be overly emotional. Hormones are a great example. But statistically, if someone is unable to control their anger or fear, more often means their prefrontal cortex is less well developed, which is also often the case for younger people, just because it doesn't develop as quickly as the part of your brain that actually houses emotion. So someone who can keep their emotions in check and be less reactionary in their responses, meaning they can pause, let the emotion fade, and then respond, often has a more developed logic process in their brain. Story 28. A while back, I was in a group of about 7 to 8 people discussing our mutual sport. At some point, the conversation shifted, and one guy brought up a complex riddle math problem he had heard before but never solved. With pen and paper, I might have been able to figure out in half an hour or so. There was this one guy sitting in a corner-old shirt, dirty pants, messy hair. He hadn't said a word for a while, just sat there, staring blankly. After 5 to 10 minutes of silence, he suddenly spoke. He just said 2 numbers. Turns out, that was the correct answer. He had solved the entire thing in his head, while the rest of us had already moved on to other small talk. And he was probably still listening to that too. At that moment, everyone in the room knew this guy is crazy smart. If anyone wants to try the problem, let me know and he'll post it. Story 21, they circle back with intent to understand how you're understanding them. Smartest guy I know used to have please explain in your own words what you think my position is as one of his conversational tools. Story 22 for me, it is your ability to ask insightful questions. During my PhD, I noticed that the really smart people could listen to a lecture on a topic that was tangential to their research and ask really insightful questions. I strove to be able to ask really good questions when presented with a topic that I was not an expert on that really pushed the lecturer on their knowledge ideas. Story 23, they let you lie and never call you out on it. People tell you way more with a lie than the one thing they tell you with a true statement. Just let them do it. Let them show you who they are, and either keep them around or move on. Story 24, I've found that highly intelligent people care little about demonstrating what they already know and instead use their energy to seek out new knowledge. Throw 2 people into a conversation, and the smart one will do far more listening than talking. I've found that genuinely intelligent people care little about talking about themselves, and they're fiercely curious about the world around them. Story 25, a client once referred to his brilliant young associate as having a very Japanese style in meetings. I thought it was a borderline offensive comment, but what he meant was that this person was never in a rush to speak, but would wait until the rest of us had blurted out our hot takes or opinions or whatever, and then say something extremely perceptive, but he had no need to dominate the discussion. Story 26, a high IQ is supposed to be a sign of intelligence, but I test around 165 every time, and I am useless at everything life in general. I cannot concentrate on anything apart from work, and even then, I am just working hard to stop my mind from wandering. I don't mean wandering. Also, I think you could just be good at IQ tests, and it is no guidance for anything at all. Story 27, just a few of many different possibilities. A person who makes decisions that are perceived by many as strange, taking unconventional paths, seemingly descending the career ladder, and so on, communicate very differently with different people. Based on the person's understanding and abilities, take a long time to make decisions, as they consider all options much more thoroughly. People who come across as if they don't know anything about their field of knowledge specialty, even though they know more than many others, but also know where the limits of their understanding are, and also know how much they don't know. Story 28, the biggest thing for me is speed of learning and automatically is able to draw connections from one seemingly distant discipline to another unrelated discipline, being able to extrapolate wide and deep. Story 29, am reminded of the story of Socrates being proclaimed by the Oracle of Delphi as the wisest man of all the Greeks, an apt example here. Socrates then went around trying to find other philosophers or mathematicians who could beat him, but everyone was so dead set in their ways that he then realized he very well was the wisest after all, for he knew nothing, and because he did not know everything, he had the ability to learn and explore, and so he realized he was the wisest and therefore smartest person in Greece. But this is the story. I would answer the prompt, as many other commenters have pointed out, that being able to think openly about the world and not be so dead set in specific ideas allows for more flexibility and therefore a better sense of worldliness and intelligence than many other people today. So that's my answer. Story 30, there's some good answers here in this absolutely unrelated and unique Reddit post, or here LOL. Story 31, someone who shares their thoughts, starting with some version of it. Is my understanding that my 11th grade history teacher was the first one I noticed this from. Everyone since that I've met who does this regularly has been brilliant. Shows they are capable of considering other options and realize their perception is just one of many possible ones. Story 32, some engineers use a technique called rubber duck debugging where they explain their problem to a toy duck and in the process will come up with a solution. A lot of times at work, I feel like I'm the rubber duck. Story 33, I think it depends on what PPL define as smart, and there are different types of smart. I find PPL who are able to be open to PPL to be smart. I try to be open and inviting and find it hard AF. Creating a community wherever you are is real smart in my book. PPL who do that usually are also very good at being subtle at it, and also to not forget to ask about others and give thoughtful compliments in a smooth way. Story 34, someone who's quiet and prefers to take a back seat during conversations. It means they're absorbing what's being said and carefully formulating a meaningful answer, or they have terrible social anxiety and are scared of saying something stupid and being mocked until the end of eternity. But since I just described myself, we're going to say it's genius. Story 35, being able to teach someone something in a simple way that someone uneducated and unintelligent could understand. It shows two things. One, a deep understanding of how it actually works because they can break it down to its core and not rely on external knowledge. Two, the ability to process quickly enough to reframe something in a way they wouldn't normally see it, which also links back to point one. If they can't reframe it, they don't understand it well. Story 36, honestly, it's silence. When they're quiet at certain times and choose not to say anything, I can't really word it. A few times I caught onto a dumb person who was putting on an act. Story 37, a good sense of humor. People that take too seriously come across as dumb to me. Some of the smartest people I've ever known really know how to crack jokes and cut tension in a room. You know these high-level IQ-EQ combo folks. When you see them, of course we all know IQ, only smart people that are too serious. Story 38, not sure if this is always the case, but there's a certain type of smart person who just seems constantly bemused, listens with a smile, with empathy, laughs softly to things that upset other people, and then suddenly asks a question but otherwise doesn't talk much. When pressed to say something, they seem reluctant, then finally blurts out something very insightful and unexpected, like they're an alien from outer space who just loves and feels bad for humans, and is delighted by all forms and expressions of humans, not just reacting to everything in terms of bad and good, right and wrong. Story 39, the smartest man I've talked to don't overly explain things, and are very short, and to the point despite having a noticeably higher intelligence than most people. Story 41, silence and the ability and preference for listening, watching, observation, the ability to mine through the of others to find some needle of knowledge that can be acquired. They don't write off others as not having at least one thing to learn from. Two, I don't know. Three, funnily enough in the research literature, it's swearing. Smarter people will swear more often and in a manner that will seem to others as excessive or crass. But if you take the time to listen, you'll notice the placement in the sentence is technical and allows the other's points to remain coherent. Tools used, not the message itself. For using simple language. Pseudo-intelligence will be that guy we remember from class, throwing around all the technical terms and jargon. The ability to relay complex information in a level appropriate to the person they're talking to while retaining the nuance and gaps of knowledge. 5. The company they keep or the company they refuse to keep. 6. Love of failing. Through failure and being proven wrong, one learns. Actively try to learn new things and make their worldview as unstable as possible. Science tells us what isn't true, not what is, and smart people function in a similar manner. 7. Love of philosophy and art and having a childish wonder. 8. Being able to separate opinion from fact and the willingness to demonstrate said separation to others rather than use the fact to support their subjective opinion. As Marx wrote, everything we see depends on how things are put. We all interpret facts through our ontology. There is no objective value, free interpretation of data, and they are not afraid to admit this. 9. Ability to say they were wrong. Story 41, being able to see all perspectives of an argument, and, more importantly, being able to know and admit when they were wrong about a stance, questioning everything. Story 42, a wise man can be confident, but he assumes he could be wrong. When things are important, he seeks opposition and differing viewpoints to ensure he's considering the most amount of experience possible, while also ensuring critical thinking is applied to validate new information and challenge his own opinions. We can be right and wrong simultaneously, but we should always assume we can be wrong and be prepared to prove with evidence why we are right. That being said, am drunk and arrogant and I love to argue. I hope for the right reasons. Story 43 avoids having strong opinions, or any at all, on a topic without having sufficient knowledge. Furthermore, recognizing the limits of their knowledge. The person who thinks they're an expert at everything is an expert at none. Story 44, they talk less than anyone else in the room. They never feel compelled to tell you what they know or what they've done. They let others win. They give praise freely. They are humble, and most of the time, it is not the person you think it is. But if you want to find out, try these tactics for yourself. Story 45, they're often racked by imposter syndrome because they know what they don't know and perversely think that other people are smarter than them. My wife used to be a scientist, and going out for drinks with her peers demonstrated how insecure they all are about their fields, competence, and knowledge. Story 46, that they keep opinions to themselves, that they don't seek validation or ranking among others. Often, those wanting to be smart are looking to prove it, or better yet, hear that they are. If you know that you're right, there's no win in telling others they're wrong. Story 47, one big sign, is when they just get things super fast, but don't make a big deal out of it. Like they'll pick up on stuff without much explanation, but they're not showing off about it. Another thing is they ask a lot of questions, not the usual ones, but deep ones that get you thinking. And they're super chill in conversations, not trying to dominate, but you can tell they've got a lot going on in their head. Oh, and they usually don't brag about what they know, kind of like they know the power of their brain, but just keep it low-key. Story 48, I think a sign of intelligence is when someone admits when they don't know something, then they ask questions and are curious. They're not angrily defensive, insisting they are right. Story 49, maybe not a complete fit for all knowledge bases, but I often find that the smartest people in particular fields are pretty aware of what they do not know, and they're usually quite interested, curious towards trying to fill that knowledge gap. Story 50, I once saw an interview with some who at the time was credited as being the most intelligent person in the world. The interviewer asked him how he managed interactions with stupid people. His answer was, the only stupid people I have ever met were people who thought they knew everything. I have thought about this often over the years. Story 51, when they don't talk about how smart they are. I was married to a genius, and my stepdad was a genius literally. Both men were never competitive in their language, and neither ever floated their own boat. Story 52, I remember this saying, a wise man speaks because he has something to say. A fool speaks because he has to say something. Intelligent people usually ask questions and listen in order to learn my opinion. Story 53, they let you talk and finish your points, rarely opting to interrupt. Sometimes they won't respond at all, even if they know for a fact what just came out of your mouth could easily be disputed, either because they're emotionally intelligent enough to protect your pride or because they think you simply wouldn't get it. TLDR, they let you. Story 54, someone who is very smart does not try to explain and correct all of the incorrect things people say or believe to be true. They let people be incorrect. Story 55, when they take the time to understand other PPLS thoughts, feelings, that it makes them not only smart, but also emotionally aware, considerate. 1010. Story 56, smart people who hide their intelligence are frequently more quiet than other people are. Smart people who hide their intelligence are frequently listening more than other people do. Smart people who hide their intelligence are frequently watching and observing more than other people do. Story 57, consistently applying epistemology on themselves. Someone who never questions how and why they know what they know is probably just operating on beliefs. A lot of very educated people are not that intelligent. Story 58, they listen well and don't care to be right or dictate the details of the conversation. When they speak, they answer questions or talk along the conversation topics, but don't overly share. Story 59, hide their wealth and their smartness. Listen more than they talk. Do not get hit by compliments as they see through this BS. Modesty and respect for others that are not as fortunate as they are. People that bring people up, not putting them down. Story 60, he doesn't waste time getting involved in other people's lives. He's more concerned with growing and improving than pleasing everyone. He doesn't make assumptions. Instead, if he wants to know, he asks. Live and let live. Story 61, they admit what they don't know and ask questions, try to learn it. People who aren't smart often think they know everything, and if they don't know, aren't interested in learning, it's intelligent to instead say, I don't know, but I do like to learn. Story 62, I've always found that those who continue learning actively throughout their lives to be not only my kind of people, but intelligent folks. I try to surround myself with people like that. Maybe their intelligence will rub off on me a little. The never-ending desire for more knowledge is something I've tried to add to my life. Story 63, some of the smartest people say very little at all. They observe, listen, and digest what is happening around them. When they do finally say something, it is usually pretty profound. Story 64, repetition. Experts recognize the value of continuing to refine whatever they're working on. Novices do something once and are dumb enough to believe they've mastered something immediately. Story 65, they don't try to prove how smart they are, like they know how to do a lot of things, but don't talk about it unless it's relevant. They listen and are good at explaining things when needed. They ask clarifying questions because they are interested in understanding what is being talked about. Story 66, people who are not desperate to belong to a group and adhere to groupthink, which is a remnant of evolution. People who don't understand the desire to identify with a football team full of strangers making obscene money for playing a game while they sit home on their couch and eat Cheetos. Yeah, you can enjoy the game, but when people's identities become dependent on their sports team, it is weak-minded. Same with politics, and not caring about the truth or the issues, but only caring which side the politician is on. People like this are half the population, and they really look indistinguishable from chimps throwing feces. Story 67, they don't have to yell. When trying to make a point, they let their words speak for themselves rather than try to verbally bully to get their point across. Story 68, I had an interesting life experience where my IQ and cognition in general dropped significantly for a year or two. Side effect of cancer that affects the brain. I felt much more insecure about how intelligent I really was. So I talked about past achievements more often and in a more obnoxious way. I showed off much more. I dwelled more on how I sounded and appeared to others, specifically how smart, clever, engaging. I was more threatened by other people's successes, whether it was in a friendly board game or in the professional world, and much more self-critical of any failure. I was also more easily panicked and angered by events that I didn't fully understand, and more susceptible to propaganda that tried to make me angry or outraged. I didn't realize the extent of what was happening to me. I had cancer for about 7 years, a quite rare, slow-growing type, and I only realized how strong the cognitive effect had been during the months after I became cancer-free. My memory improved. My ability to gauge when a joke was funny and appropriate was much better. I became kinder and more emotionally intelligent again. My quickness in conversation was back to where it used to be, and I felt much more confident and unthreatened by others' success and intelligence. I would say that all of these qualities are typical of people who are intelligent and secure in their own abilities. Experiencing what was essentially a window into dementia has affected me deeply. I have more empathy towards people who feel insecure about their own intelligence. To me, it felt like I was floundering and almost drowning constantly. And, of course, I was more easily angered and panicked in that situation. I felt like I was always trying to cover up and redirect people from thinking I was stupid, which ironically made me come off as very insecure and off-putting. I'm also more grateful every day for the intelligence I have, and don't feel dissatisfied or self-critical nearly as often, and usually catch myself when I do. I know how incredibly lucky I am to be able to come back from lowered cognitive ability. I'm able to just be as intelligent as I am, without needing to prove it over and over again to myself and everyone around me. When I meet someone else like that, to me, it's a sign of both mental and emotional intelligence. That is all. Story 69, people who are able to effectively reframe topics to match the people they're talking to. I've always been jealous of people who are able to explain things persuasively. In my opinion, social intelligence is the best kind of intelligence to have. Just because we do a lot of talking, you can get by on just being smart in intellectual matters. But being able to communicate effectively is just so useful. Story 70, their heads are like 12 feet tall with a lot of tubes and wires going in and out of it, and multiple digital interfaces are surrounding them. Displays changing at a pace our eyes can't keep up with, and the biggest big gulp you've ever seen in their pale, pudgy hands. Asking deceptively simple questions, they probe deeper, making others think without revealing how much they already know. Letting others talk, they listen more than they speak. Gathering info before weighing in. Downplaying their intelligence, they avoid showing off, and may even act clueless to disarm people. Picking up on details others miss, whether in conversations, patterns, or problems. They see things that fly over most heads. Explaining complex ideas, simply they don't use big words to sound smart. They make hard concepts easy to grasp. Adapting to different crowds, they can blend in with all kinds of people. Adjusting their communication style effortlessly. Winning debates without arguing, they guide discussion subtly, making their points feel like common sense rather than a challenge. Being effortlessly creative, they connect unrelated ideas, problem solve on the fly, and think outside the box. Story 71, drawing comparisons. This could be in terms of similes and metaphors, or it could be in going OH. That sounds kind of like when they're learning a new concept The ability to graft together concepts and ideas and link them to other knowledge bases they have is a very, very functional kind of intelligence. Story 72, they usually come across as less arrogant and have a good sense of humor. Instead of boasting on about themselves and what they know, they ask questions and listen, having interest in learning. When you ask them questions, they can break complex topics down so the average person can understand them. Story 73, someone who lets you and everyone else in emerge. It doesn't mean that they are weak, just shows that they know things are better when you work together. Story 74, a lot of them, in my experience, have some nihilistic and misanthropic tendencies, usually hard-earned from trying to be the better person for too long while nobody else did.